Okay, ready.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our contracts agreements training. I'm super excited for all the great work and information that's going to be shared today. It was a lot of great effort that was put in from the Strategic Action 7 Committee and the Strategic Action 7 Subcommittee. And all the presenters here did play a big role in putting the information together. I also want to take a minute to just highlight and just acknowledge Kyanne Eastman's contributions to this work. She was an integral part of this work as well, and just want to take a minute to just share that as well. So this is really, really great information, and I hope that you all enjoy it and get a lot out of it, and it really will streamline the contracts process. So with that, I will turn it over to whoever will be presenting next. Ingrid, thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. The purpose of this training is mainly for some of you it's a refresher, and for others it will be brand new information. We hope that you learn from this, and whatever we don't cover, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Next. The facilitators today are Stephanie Gomez, the Chief Business Officer, Jazz Sohal, Purchasing Services Manager, Marcela Miranda, Human Resources Director, Irina Chachter, Data Governance and Strategy Manager, Howard Stiskin, Risk Management Supervisor, Davey Shao, Senior Executive Assistant, Elizabeth Franco, Senior Grant Writer, and Ingrid Campbell, Contracts Analyst. Next. Some basic guidelines to help have a better training. This training session is being recorded so we can make it available for the people who were not able to attend. It will be posted in the intranet probably within the next couple of weeks. Please remain muted to avoid distractions. Enter your questions in the chat. We will be monitoring your questions. There will be a Q&A at the end of the training as time allows. For any questions that we are not able to get because we don't have the time, we will include those to the FAQ document, or if it is a specific question for your specific department or your specific program, we will try to get back to you with the answer. You will receive a link to a post-training survey. Please take the time to provide feedback. And this is another place where you can also post any questions that you might have that was not addressed during the training, or a question that came up for you during the training. The training presentation are recorded, will be posted on the intranet. We will try to get it there as soon as possible, but no more than 2 weeks. Next. The training overview. What will we cover during this training? We will go over the independent contractor versus employee determination. We will go over the contract's definition. We will look at the SCCOE contracts and other type of agreements. The contracts, we will review the contracts agreement routing sheets. They will update it. We will go over insurance requirements, purchasing requirements, data privacy agreements, human resources requirements for contracts with the student contact access, and we end the training by reviewing the SCCOE professional services agreement sections. Next. The independent contractor versus employee determination. This is one of the first steps we need to make when considering entering into a contract with a vendor. And when we say employee determination, we are referring to the non-regular certificated employees or the classified professional experts. Next. So what would determine or what would trigger this determination? When you are entering into a contract, or before you enter into a contract, it is highly recommended that you request a W-9 from the vendor. This is what is going to tell you whether we can proceed with a PSA, with a professional services agreement, or if you need to go through HR. Next. What to look for. when you receive a W-9, might have this type of situation where you can have maybe just a first and last name, or sometimes you will have a first and last name and a doing business as name on this box number 2 of the W-9. Sometimes you are dealing with a vendor, and the whole time you're dealing with them, they are referring to their company, or they are referring to themselves as the learning partners. But then when you receive the W-9, it comes to you this way. Next. A lot of times when you have a first name and a doing business as, the W-9 is going to have the first box checked for individual. This will tell you, okay, this contractor is not a company. Is not an LLC, or it could be an LLC. Then you have to look at the next step. Next. When you look at the part 2, you have a social security number instead of an employee identification number. If this is the case, then the independent contractor register's employee determination process gets triggered. And this is a new process. Some of you have already been following the process. You have contacted me. I have provided you with the information or a quick training on it, but for some of you, this might be new. Next. So the independent contractor versus employee determination is actually required by the IRS. So the IRS came up with this, they call it the ABC questionnaire. And the factors that you need to consider, or the questions that you need to ask yourself and the vendor are, is the consultant vendor free from the control and direction of the SCCOE in performing work, both practically and in the contractual agreement between the parties? B, does the consultant vendor perform work that is outside the usual course of the SCCOE business? And C, is the consultant vendor customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as the work performed for the SCCOE? Next. We have come up with this questionnaire. This was developed with the support of payroll and HR. These are the 3 questions that the IRS asks, but we have added some other questions or supporting questions or helping questions to help you determine if the answer to the ABC questions are yes or no. Some of them can be a little bit confusing, so please feel free to reach out anytime if you don't know exactly how to answer one of the questions. The process to follow when the consultant vendor provides you a W-9 with a social security number are, next. First, you need to fill out the ABC questionnaire. This form and all the forms that will be referenced during this training can be found in the intranet. All the forms are live now, so you can please go to the intranet and get the updated versions. All the forms were updated. Next, send a copy of the ABC questionnaire and the W-9 to the contracts office for review. We are using a contracts office general email, but this email is being monitored by me. So you can either send it to contracts@SCCOE or send it to myself. Next. The contracts office will send the W-9 to the district business and advisory services accountant for a PERS check, and will review the ABC questionnaire. Next. Based on the PERS check result and the answers in the ABC questionnaire, the contracts office will determine if it is okay to proceed with the professional services agreement, or if the consultant vendor should be processed as a NRCE or CLPE through HR. Next. If it is determined that the vendor consultant needs to go through HR, you can find all the documents needed under the intranet forms and templates, the human resources tab. And this little box here shows how it looks, what are the forms that you can find in that section. Before the process itself, when you have a non-regular certificated employee or a classified professional expert, please contact Mary Olival. She's the manager on employment services. Her and her team will help you navigate through the process of processing the vendor or consultant through the HR. Next. Contracts definition. What is a contract? A contract is a mutual agreement where two parties consent to a legally enforceable document that creates an obligation to do or not to a particular thing. You have an offer, you have an acceptance, you have a contract. Here at SCCOE, contracts are used for acquiring services, special assignments, or special relationships with outside entities via written agreement. For this last point, we really want you to please pay close attention. A signed SCCOE contract is legal and enforceable under the California law. We want to stress this point. If there were to be a disagreement between a vendor and SCCOE while they're performing services, providing services to our agency, the contract could end up in court. That's why it is so important that we follow all the steps, that we make sure we follow all the process, and that we write a clear and easy to understand contract. Next. Which are the contracts that we have here in the SCCOE? We have the professional services agreement for services. We have professional services agreement involving contact with or access to students. We have the legal services agreement. Next. Other types of agreements that we process here in the agency are MOUs. And for the MOUs, we have a brand new process. The Strategic Action 7 committee and subcommittee under the direction of the superintendent have developed a brand new process and a brand new MOU template. If you want more information, or I strongly recommend, if your department processes MOUs, please make sure to attend one of the MOU trainings. We will have those at the end of the month. If you don't have the links for the registration, please feel free to email me and I will send you those links. You can find all the new documents that the Strategic Action 7 committee and subcommittee develop under the intranet tab, on contracts and MOU tab. And you can also find a copy of the Superintendent Policy 3294, where it delineates what the requirements are. We are hoping to have a agency-wide MOU where everybody were using the same template by no later than April. If you already have MOUs, routing, don't worry about it. But please, for new MOUs, make sure to use the new template. We also have lease agreements, construction, contracts. These contracts, most of the time, are processed by General Services and Purchasing. So please contact them if you think you're going to need one of these. Technology agreements, data sharing agreements. This is one of the contracts or agreements that are new to our agency. The data governance department has developed new and is in the process to developing new agreements, but you can find all the documents and resources that they have available under the intranet. They have a tab for data governance. If you have any other questions or you need more clarification, feel free to contact them. The grants, the grants office has also developed a brand new process. They have new documents, they have new resources. This all follows the Administrative Regulation 3292. Please take a moment to go to the intranet, check what they have there, and as always, feel free to reach out to them for specific questions regarding grants. Interoffice service agreement. This is for services between SCCOE departments. Next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Franco. I'm the Senior Grant Writer in the Grants and Partnerships and Operations Office. And I just wanted to go over a couple of items about the grants. First of all, as Ingrid just mentioned, there is now AR 3292, which was rolled out in June of 2020. That has clearly puts our new grant approval and submittal routing form process. So we ask that you follow that. And then once a grant is received, to send us a copy of the executed agreement. Then after that, use a no student contact routing sheet to route the fully signed grant agreement or notification letter through the internal businesses, services, contracts, risk management process to receive the risk management number. Step 2 is for record keeping only. The contracts office and risk management teams do not review the grant application. That is done by the Grants and Partnerships and Operations Office. And then finally, you will complete the approved grant information form for accounting, which is available on the intranet underneath the businesses tab. If you have any questions about the grants process and specifically AR 3292, please reach out to the Grants and Partnerships and Operations Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now we're going to go over the contracts and agreements routing sheet. We updated the routing sheets based on some feedback we received from administrative assistants. We tried to make it a little easier and to cover some of the changes that we have gone through. The main changes to the routing sheets are next. We updated this section where we collect the staff contact information. We now have the contract originator, which is going to be the admin gathering all the information and in charge of the routing. We also need the name of the responsible administrator. The responsible administrator is the manager, coordinator, supervisor. It could also be the assistant superintendent. If this is the person who is in charge of this contract, this is the person who initiated the contract with the vendor. This is the person who will be approving invoices to be paid and who will be in charge of monitoring that the services are being provided according to the contract. The other two spaces that we added in this section are the division and department. Please make sure you provide this information to us. We need to make sure that the contracts are filed under the correct division and department. You can either spell out the full name of your division and department, or you can use acronyms. Next. We moved the contract agreement information and compensation terms sections to the top of the routing sheet. The reason behind this is that a lot of times the information that we get in these sections are going to determine whether we can do an MOU or a professional service agreement. It also tells us if it is an amendment. And based on the contract amount, that will determine which category you need to mark in step 1 of the routing to be in compliance with the AR 3310. Next. We added a revenue box. This is mainly for MOUs where we are providing services and we are being paid by the other agency or the school districts. Also, you will use this for when you have a grant, when you're routing a grant, or when you are routing some kind of contract. A lot of times contracts from the county where they are providing funds. Next. We moved the section regarding the contract packet to step 2, which just made more sense based on the feedback we received from the admins. Next. We added a risk management insurance review step. Our experience tells us that most of the time, the one point where contractors have the more issues with or come back with is the insurance section. So we want to make sure that we have the right insurance even before we start our internal routing for the managers, directors, and the assistant superintendents to review the insurance. It will also help facilitate, or it will help save time on the review process. Next. We have added a data governance initial section. This is going to be for contracts or MOUs or agreements that involve data sharing. Next. We added the SCCOE signs first. This is mainly when approved for revenue agreements, MOUs, and we have a few other exceptions, like when you are doing an MOU, you are processing an MOU with certain school districts who require for us to sign first so they can present that MOU to the board. Next. The student contact routing sheet had basically the same changes as the non-student contact routing sheet. The changes specific to student contact are, next. Step number 6. This step is mainly for the responsible administrator. We want to make sure that responsible administrator is acknowledging that the services cannot begin until the contract is finalized and the hiring authorization form is approved by HR. Like I mentioned, we just want you to acknowledge this point. We don't want people who has not been clear by HR to get into our classrooms. Step number 7 is for the contract originator or admin to collaborate with human resources. They gather all the required components and submit the complete contractor packet to HR. 8. Human Resources Certificated Personnel Director reviews the contract for completion of required HR components. I wanted to also mention at this point that Human Resources is going through a transition at this moment. They will be switching roles, and we will inform everybody who attended this training when the switch or when the transition is completed. We will inform everybody who will be reviewing or who will be initialing this section. As a reminder, for all contract services cannot start until the contract is fully executed, and you will hear me mention this a few times during the meeting or during the training. For contact with or access to student contracts, services cannot start until the contract is fully executed and clearance has been issued by Human Resources. Next. For legal contracts, the legal contracts are all managed by the Office of the Superintendent. If you have the need for a legal contract, please make sure you contact Ruby Parra for new legal contracts. And if you already have a contract in place and you need to have an amendment, please contact Jamie Whitford. Next. Who initials the routing sheet? We will go into more details on who initials the routing sheet during our next training. Is going to be taking place March 10th. That will cover the routing sheet in more detail and DocuSign. So as an overview for section 1, compliance with AR 3310 is purchasing Jazz Sohal. Section 3, insurance review will be risk management. For construction, design, and leases will be general services director. For software technology purchases, it will be the technology, infrastructure, and support services. This is actually a new department that is going to be reviewing all the documents or all the contracts that have to do with software technology purchases. Next. For contracts agreement involving student data sharing, contract Irina Schachter, data governance and strategy manager. For the student contact contracts, section A, HR components, contact Marcela Miranda, but as I mentioned, they will be going through some transition. They're going transition right now. We will provide the new contact information as soon as that's finalized. For student contact contract, section 6, once again, this is required. The responsible contract administrator initials and acknowledges that contract vendor will not begin services until the contract is finalized and the clearance has been issued by human resources. All sections requiring internal business services will be initialed by the contract analyst. Next.
Now, hello, I'm Howard Stiskin in the Risk Management Department. The Risk Management Department reviews and approves the insurance portion of each contract. As an overview, we require specific insurance from our contractors to protect COE in case there is a claim for bodily injury or property damage. With that in mind, a certificate of liability insurance is required for all contracts. For contracts with no student contact, sections 5 and 6 of the contract outlines the required insurance. For contracts with student contact, sections 7 and 8 of the contract outlines the required insurance. As a practice pointer, delays in the approval process generally occur when insurance information is missing. I suggest that at the beginning of the contracting process, you point out the specific insurance sections to your contractor and recommend that they provide them to their insurance broker. Next slide. So this is what a proper certificate of liability insurance is going to look like. The top red circle is for the insured, which is the contractor. The middle red circle is where we needed to state that COE is an additional insured, which means that the contractor's insurance covers us, which is one of the most important components. And finally, next, the bottom circle is the certificate holder, which is us, and confirms that the certificate of insurance was sent to us. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Just before you start, I also wanted to mention that during the routing sheet training, we will go into a little more detail on what you need to collect to be compliant with the certificate of insurance requirement for contracts. Jess?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. So I will be covering AR 3310 and Board Policy 3312. Just in case our audience doesn't know where these board policies are located, if you go to our main website and go the first tab, which is About Us, click on the Board of Education, and the second tab, you'll see SECO Administrative Regulation and Board Policy. You click on that, and then the body of the page, you'll see Board Docs. Once you click on the Board Docs, it'll take a little bit to open up Board Docs. Click under Policies, and that's where all our policies reside. These two particular one are under Business and Non-Instructional Operation, which is our internal control 3000. And then you can just scroll down and look up any of these policies in detail. So I just wanted to cover that. I can actually, these two next slides that you see, I can send it to you so you could have it for a quick reference. Basically, I designed it so you can quickly identify type of purchase you have, total amount of purchase you can do under this type of purchase. First one being informal quotation, which are small purchases for equipment, materials, supplies, maintenance services, and your miscellaneous services. Next, you'll see a code or solicitation requirement, minimum of one document, prefer a written code is okay. Best practice to get, at least 3 quotations. I'm also writing down in here what are the compliance components, education codes? To give you an example, EC 17604 basically talks about our superintendent's power of authority and delegation. Education code 17605 gets a little more into that. And where superintendent of school can provide a blanket authorization, such as a person like me or department to purchasing. So there's all these rules. Government codes are same. They talk a lot about construction. So these are all rules, regulations that we need to be in compliance for. Why we ask for, basically why I'm kind of number one, why my department is number one on the routing sheet. It needs to come to us so we can determine if it's over the bid threshold. Should you be doing an RFP? Should you be doing best source justification, sole source? So we ask for those requirements as an internal control department, so we stay in compliance with all these ed codes, public contract codes, and I'm not listing all of them here. There's actually a few more. If, for example, if it's Head Start and using federal funds, then there's other compliance codes we need to make sure that we abide by. I'm listing what board policies dictate these purchases. If these purchases require a contract, and what is the signature authority, which also comes from AR 3310. For example, in number one, your informal quotations, your managers and directors can sign long as they're under 3,000. Formal quotations that are between 3,000 and 99099. This amount 99099, it comes from a bid threshold that is annually adjusted for inflation. So for 2022, the bid threshold is 99,100. Last year was 97,000 some. So every year it changes. So as long as this formal quotation is under that amount, you can get 3 written codes. You want to do a best source. Again, on the right of the chart, again, I'm just writing down what are the public contract codes and ed codes, and it'll depend which one applies depending on if it's in the construction or service and those type of things. Purchase order issued by purchasing. So we, just so you all know, we do monitor non-conforming POs. We do see requisitions where it says for payment only. That's a no-no. You should always contact purchasing. We will try to expedite because you have a time constraint. But our AR 33 says that our first option is to do a requisition. You are not to contact a vendor and engage in a service or procure service from them without a purchase order. And then again, for this, if for a signature authority, if you have a dollar amount over 3,000, then you need your chief to sign, and chief can sign all the way up to 99,999. Above that, it needs to route to the superintendent. So if going down, formal quotations that are at 99,100 or more need to go through a formal process that is an RFP or bid on the constructions. Well, I don't want to get into bid because we're CUPCA. I'm not even covering construction here. But if it's over that amount and you could have a material that we're bidding out, then we need to advertise that for competitive bidding. And then I'm writing down the public contract codes that we follow, and they're very detailed on how long you advertise for. We advertise for once a week for 2 weeks consecutive. So there's these type of details in these public contract codes. Next. These next 3 rows, we get a lot of question on. Piggyback is basically if you already have a school district that gone out, did a proper, and these are for items that are over the bid threshold. And if there's a district that's already gone through the bidding process that and has a language that other entities, other government entities can piggyback off of their contract, that's what this applies to. And if you're procuring something that other district, just check with us and I can go talk to other district and see if there's an existing contract. These are kind of exceptions to the bidding process. We only do these when we're in extreme. The share drive went away. Ingrid?
Debbie?
Yes, my internet was unstable. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, Debbie.
I can see
Okay,
it now.
thank you.
So piggyback we use when we're extreme time constraint. We need to get something done because the RFP bid process takes about a month to advertise, get those proposals back, evaluate them. And those are the circumstances under which we'll look for a piggyback contract. A neighboring school district may have procured the same item or service, and it needs to be alike. We cannot use a piggyback and modify, like the service. It needs to be the same exact service or the component that we can piggyback off of. And we do that on the technology side. There's CMOS and other government contracts that exist. There are cooperatives where state has already gone out and procured at a larger volume for the entire state. And then we often, for technology and those type of things, piggyback those services. Sole source, this is tricky. We get a lot of questions on those. If you feel you have a service and there's no other vendors, please talk to us because we want to look that into detail, because this is where most of the auditors look for. A lot of these purchases tend to be over the bid threshold, and we need to be very careful because there's very limited statutory authority and exceptions where you can use sole source technology being one, medical, and very unique professional services. Certain auditors that specialize in certain type of auditing or architect. So if you have a situation where it's a sole source, please talk to us because there's a lot of detail I will take you through that I can't cover here. For example, if you just trying to buy a laptop and in your proposal, you said, you only want Apple. I just want to make sure why Apple is your only choice, because that would be sole source, right? And Apple doesn't have has a competition, but depending on what the services is, if you have a sole source, please contact us. And again, I want to emphasize what's happening. What happens every now and then is that we'll get a routing sheet. It comes to us. It has a sole source attached to it or a best source. And I start reading it and it's rejected because it should have gone to RFP. So it will really save you time because we will reject it. In order to be compliant, it should have gone to RFP, and the best source or sole source justification is not enough. It should have gone out to competitive bidding. Next. So this is straight out of AR 3310 that talks about one of the columns I had, which is basically the signature authority, requisition purchase orders that are non-contractual agreements, 0 to 99. Your manager directors can approve those. And then all the way to 100,000 over that go to superintendent for routing. And has some other P card information as well that we're not covering.
Can I add a note on here? Even though it says contracts from 0 to 3,000, the authorized manager can sign, but it is SCCOE policy, the managers, coordinators, and supervisors are not SCCOE authorized signatories for contracts. Contracts, MOU, and agreements between 0 and 2,999 must be signed by the department's director. Just wanted
Correct.
to add that.
You're correct. Next. So board policy 3312 basically says that all contract with outside agency needs to conform with standard requirement that are within the California law, and they need to be prepared under the direction of Santa Clara County Office of Education. And additionally, it states that anything over 250,000, it needs to get on the board agenda, regular board agenda, and go to the board meetings for the board review. It also states that if you had such a contract and now you're increasing that over 25,000 and there's a budget revision involved, then it needs to put on your financial document and that needs to go to the board. So that's all I have. And please, any question you have on best source, sole source, I know there's a lot of information. We're here to serve you. Contact us. It will save you a lot of time. We'd rather get involved on the front end rather than the back end and reject any of your routing sheets or your contracts.
Thank you, Jess. I also wanted to add it here for the board policy 3310, that in the past, departments were required to send their contracts that were over 250,000. We have changed that process, and now the internal business services will compile this information and prepare the report to be submitted to the board. Next.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Irina Schachter, Manager of Data Governance. Today, I'll be covering the student data privacy and data sharing portion of the presentation. And as Ingrid mentioned earlier, those of you who have recently routed an MOU of contract will have seen addition to the routing form, which is a checkbox for data sharing. So the Data Governance Department now reviews all contracts and MOUs that involve student data sharing. So today, we'll cover some basics around the laws that govern student data privacy to create a shared understanding around this topic, as well as a few use cases. We won't be able to cover all the scenarios for student data sharing, but rather we'll focus on processes and forms needed for two types of data sharing that cover the bulk that we see in contracts and MOUs. The first one is for contracts with a vendor for a technology app or tool used by our student programs. And the second one will be MOUs when data is being shared from our data warehouse on behalf of districts. As mentioned earlier, please feel free to reach out with any questions about the information that I covered today, or if you have any other types of data sharing that needs to happen via an MOU or contract that we don't cover today. So before we can jump into the data privacy laws, it's important to review some key terms so that we have a common understanding around these. Education records are records about a student that are maintained by an educational agency and involve things like academic data, discipline data, and health data. PII, or personally identifiable information, is a piece of information that identifies an individual student. PII can be a direct identifier that's specific to the student, like the student's name, address, or SSID, or an indirect identifier that can be used in conjunction with other pieces of information to identify the student. A subset of PII, called directory information, is generally not considered to be an invasion of privacy if shared. This usually includes information like the student's name, address, and phone number. Under FERPA, each LEA must determine what data elements they consider directory information and notify parents, as well as give them an option to opt out of their students' information being shared. A school official is someone with legitimate educational interest in accessing a student's PII records. As with directory information, each LEA must determine the definition of both school official and legitimate educational interest and notify parents. There should also be reasonable attempt to limit access of school officials to only the educational records that they have legitimate educational interest in. Next slide, please. So there are several key student data privacy laws that all of our employees should have some familiarity with, especially those who have access to PII level information to complete mandatory job functions. FERPA, or the Family Educational Privacy Rights Act, outlines the rights of children and parents in relations to a student's educational record. FERPA has many provisions, but the pertinent one for this presentation is that this law restricts who can access and use student PII information from a student's educational record. All access and use must be granted by parents unless it falls under one of the four following exceptions. A school official, which is someone inside the school, or a third party that again must fit under the LEA's definition of school official and legitimate educational interest. Directory information can be shared that fall within the LEA's definition of those data elements and whose parents or guardians have not opted out of their students' information being shared. A studies exception where data is needed to be shared to develop or validate tests, administer student aid programs, or improve instruction, and an audit or an evaluation function whose purpose is to audit or evaluate federal or state-supported education programs and enforce and comply with federal legal requirements related to the program. COPA and SOPIPA are laws for vendors that limits information that can be collected for students and how that information can be used. PPRA governs the collection of information from students, usually via survey, of sensitive information in protected topic areas. The laws dictate that the LEAs must show parents these materials before they are given to students and give parents the option to opt out. HIPAA protects the privacy and security of health records in relation to electronic transactions for covered entities. This law rarely applies to health information on a student as their educational record, as FERPA provisions usually apply. IDEA establishes privacy provisions similar to, but more robust than FERPA for informations around students' educational needs and supports provided. NSLA establishes privacy provisions similar to, but also more robust than FERPA for information on students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. Next slide, please. Now that we've reviewed the terms and laws that need to be considered when sharing students' educational records, let's discuss the needed forms and permissions. When an MOU or contract needs to be routed to the data governance department because there's student data sharing, there are several things we consider. First off is the SACOE, the organization that is sharing the data. If other parties are actually doing the data sharing, we don't require anything because the party sharing student data is responsible for determining the legality of data sharing, as well as the documentation that they require. It is important to note that while we don't require any documentation, it is vital that SACOE employees that are receiving data or gaining access to data follow the federal and state laws around student data privacy, as well as any other provisions that are outlined in the contract or MOU around the purpose, use, destruction, etc. of the data. Employees should also adhere to best practices around data security and keeping their computers secure, as well as using appropriate places to store data to ensure that access to the shared data is theirs alone. Another pertinent question we can ask is, are SCCOE student program data being shared? If the data that is the only data that can be shared at the PII level from educational records should, start from the top there. COE student data can be shared without parental consent as long as it falls within one of the exceptions for sharing of PII data under FERPA. If data sharing is outlined outside of these FERPA exceptions, parental consent will need to be obtained. If a contract is with a vendor, staff should review the SDPC database linked at the bottom of the slide to see if there is already a data privacy agreement in place with another LEA. The NDPA was developed by the California Student Privacy Alliance and CITE so that LEAs could use the statewide agreement to ensure that vendors are aware of and comply with student data privacy laws. Having an NDPA in place with a vendor is not required, but highly encouraged. Otherwise, data governance and technology teams can review the vendor's DPA to ensure that the appropriate data privacy and security portions are covered on a case-by-case basis. For projects that wish to leverage our student data warehouse, all data sharing is prohibited without the express permission of a district. This is because even though the SCCOE data warehouse holds various pieces of information for all of our districts, districts still maintain complete control of that data. The decision rests with the district if the proposed data sharing is legal and permissible. Data sharing can be in the form of data extracts, for example, as a part of a grant or evaluation in partnership with our districts, or access to a participating district's instance of data zone. For example, when staff and PLISD or the CIA teams are working directly with districts to provide supports and services. For a data extracts, permission forms should not be routed to district without contacting the data governance department and discussing the data elements, timelines, and other pertinent information, because we work closely with the data and analytics team, who are the ones who are actually pulling the data to scope and schedule the work. Also, please note that there may be a cost for the work depending on the project and the complexity of the requests. Signed permission forms don't have to be included with the MOU or contract and can be done at a later time if the MOU or contract needs to be processed on a faster timeline. However, it is important to note that the data will not be pulled or shared with you without a signed district permission form in place. Therefore, COE staff are actually strongly encouraged to discuss any data sharing that involves the data warehouse with a data governance team well in advance of a contract or MOU being routed. For data zone access, a district can decide to grant a COE staff member they are working with access to their instance of data zone. SCCOE staff will only be granted access after a signed permission form is on file from the district and they have completed the COE student data privacy and security course. Both the data extract and the data zone access permission forms can be found on the intranet under the data governance tab in forms and templates. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. We want to give everybody a little break here. We know this is a lot of information. For some of you, it's a review. For others, it's brand new information. It is 10:56. We will take a 4-minute break. Take a time to look away from your laptop, give your eyes a little rest, and we'll meet again at 11.
Check, check. Check, check. Check. Debbie, can you hear me?
Hi, Marcella. Yes.
Marcella.
I can hear you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Check, check, check. Check, check.
Welcome back, everyone. We will keep moving forward with our next up will be covering the HR, the human resources section.
Ingrid, do you have a problem with your volume?
Can you hear me now?
It sounds a little bit like we were talking about earlier.
Can you hear me now?
It's all right, Ingrid. I can go ahead and get started if that's
Yes,
okay
please,
with you.
Marcella, if you can please start covering the HR sections of the student contact contracts. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that my sound is coming in loud and clear. Great. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. It's still morning time. It's a pleasure to be here to support you with this process. I am Marcella Miranda, I'm the Director of Human Resources, one of the Directors of Human Resources here for the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And as Ingrid mentioned earlier, we will be transitioning this part of the contract to our same Department of Human Resources, but we'll give you more information as that transition completes. All right, so for now, Human Resources is here to support our various departments with processing contracts where contractors have contact with our students. Notice we have added the word access. One of the new learnings and outcomes that have come out of COVID is that our contractor interactions may have shifted from physical contact to virtual access. So we want to ensure that we are protecting our students on all fronts. So in advance, I want to thank all of you for your patience as we navigate this new normal. And we'll continue working together to figure out and make sure that at the end of the day, our students are protected in general. So as you can see here, so we have added here we want to make sure that before, and again, something that Ingrid stressed earlier, I want to go ahead and stress again, that our contractors should not have access to students before they have clearance from human resources. So what it says here is contractors shall not allow any employees, interns, volunteers, subcontractors, agents, and representatives to have any contact with their students on any Santa Clara County Office of Education site, online, virtually, or Santa Clara County Office of Education related activity until the agreement has been fully executed and clearance has been issued by human resources. We have had instances where we come to find out that someone has not yet cleared, and then we find out that they're now having access, and that's not okay. And I understand. I'm sure you understand why. All staff associated with the contractor will be cleared and notified by human resources of the satisfactory fulfillment of requirements so forth in such agreement. Next slide. All right. So here are the clearance requirements set forth to ensure that this is happening. So number one, the contractor originator notifies the contractor of the requirements and components that they need to have. So that is found on our HR website. The second step is that the contract originator notifies HR Employment Services with the name and contact information of the person who will be providing required forms and documents. This kind of seems obvious, but we want to make sure that we know who we're talking to. There have been instances where contractors can be a little bit sneaky, and they'll just start sending us information, and sometimes the department doesn't even know about it, and they haven't even initiated a contract. So we want to make sure that we are not spinning our wheels processing a contractor when they haven't even notified the department. So we want to make sure that the contract originator notifies us and gives us a heads up of when of who we should be speaking, the person that we should be speaking with regarding the contract. The next step is that HR Employment Services contacts contractor to schedule a live scan appointment. So once we receive all of the information and we have the packets, then, in this instance, Yanni, for example, is the one that reaches out to the contractor and then schedules the live scan appointment. Sometimes that is, because of COVID, they could be doing the live scan appointment outside. Sometimes they'll be doing it here at Ritter Park. So it just depends on the agreement that has been made. So every agreement is different. So feel free to reach out to Yanni or myself to figure out where the live scan is happening. But that's something that Yanni is doing, scheduling with the contractor directly anyways. Next slide. These are the clearance requirements that the contractors have to go through and submit. So these are the packets that I was referring to. So the contractor's packet will include the authorization and certification, general information sheet, emergency form, code of conduct, mandated reporter acknowledgement, and technology agreements if necessary. Again, every contract is different. Individual license, certification or credentials, TB risk assessments, evidence of completed mandated reporter training, and if applicable, daycare facility and exemptions. Again, every contract is different. And again, I just want to stress that human resources will contact the contractors regarding fingerprinting appointments. If it's done here at the county office, the fee would be $74. But again, because of COVID and it's happening outside of Ritter Park, Yanni will be providing those documents and forms to the contractors directly. Next slide. Okay, So once all of that is completed and the packets are turned in, and all the fingerprints are cleared, HR initials the contract and notifies the contractor initiator of the clearance. So we'll let you know when that happens, when they're cleared. There are instances where we have contracts that are renewed. And so feel free to reach out to Yanni, who can let you know if their TB, if their clearances are still good for another year. So she'll let you know about that information. We do also have instances where we have one-time supervised events or activities. When you have that, if you have any questions about that, if they can just come in through sort of like a guest form, please make sure you connect with us, because that's not always the case. Again, we want to make sure that we are protecting our students, whether it's, we have physical contact, or even if it's virtual. So if you have that situation, and even though it might be a one-time situation, contact us so we can talk through it and figure out the best route to take. Thank you.
Different sections of the professional service agreement. It sounds like I might have some internet connection problems, even though I'm here at ACCOE. So if at any time tell me that there are some issues. So what I'm going to do is switch to Debbie's desk.
It's okay.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Awesome. So I need to now wear a mask because I'm in an open area here at the ACCOE. We will review the professional services agreement sections. I think I can take this one. Okay. When you are filling out the form, the contract itself, there are certain steps or certain things that we need to make sure we are filling out correctly. As I mentioned before, all of our contracts are legally enforceable under the California law. So it is extremely important that we fill out these contracts the best and the most accurate way possible. So when you are doing and we're just going to go over the sections that you have to fill out. Our contracts have 12 and 16 pages. We won't go over all the regular legal terms. We will mainly go over the sections where you, either the admin or the responsible administrator, has to fill out the information. On the first page, you will have to enter the company's name. Please make sure this name is matching the name that is shown on the W-9. We cannot have a contract written under ABC company, but then when we check the W-9 says 1, 2, 3 education. Those two names need to match. And the other place where the name needs to match is in the certificate of insurance. So there are 3 places where the name needs to match when you write in a contract. The first page of the contract, the W-9, and the certificate of insurance. We want to make sure that the person who is insured or the company who is insured is the company we're writing in contract with. The term of this agreement shall be for a period beginning on. This is going to be your start date and the end date. you might have contracts where your service it ends in, let's say, April. We highly recommend that you do it for the fiscal year. That will save you some time unless the contractor or the vendor doesn't want that. The compensation and payments, the amount not to exceed, this is something that sometimes we forget. This is a not to exceed amount. So if you have a contract and at the end of the contract, you have it for $10,000, but at the end you only spend $9,000, there is no need for an amendment. Our contract is written in a way that you can actually spend less than the amount in this section. But if you at the end have to pay the vendor more than $10,000, then you will need to process an amendment. Then we jump to item 25, the notice to parties. This section most of the time is not really the same as the persons who are signing the contract, but this is important to fill out this information correctly, because in the case that there is any issue, we need to know who we can contact for questions or for clarifications. Notice to the SEC office, like I mentioned, no, it's not always the person who is signing. It could be in this section, you could have your director or your manager or whoever is the responsible administrator contact information. Notice to the contractor is the same. The name of the company has to match what you have on the first page. And then all this information will be most of the time the person you've been in contact with when developing the contract. For the signatures, the contractor will determine who the authorized official is to sign on their behalf. For the SCCOE, it will be determined by the routing sheet threshold. Here, the same for the contractor company name, it needs to match whatever you have on page 1. Again, if you have ABC company, you cannot have 1, 2, 3 education in this page. They need to match. The title of the person who is signing is required. And this little box at the bottom for contracts, office risk management use only, this is a new box that we added to all the contracts. This is to make it a little more clean when we are assigning the RM number. So like I mentioned at the beginning, all the forms for contracts have been updated. So please, if you have something saved on your desktop, delete it, go into the internet and make sure you download all the new versions of the forms. Signatures accepted are the wet signature or a certified digital signature. If we see a signature that is just typed in, we won't accept that. We will have to return it, make sure it goes through the proper signature process, whether it be a wet signature that was scanned or some kind of digital signature. For, like I mentioned, for the SCCOE authorized official, it will follow the threshold amount listed in the routing sheet. A scope of services, how do we fill this out? For contracts, remember, contracts are legally enforceable in the state of California. So the more information and the clear information that we add to this section, the better it is, the more protected our agency will be in case there is some kind of dispute. What should we include here? What is the purpose of the contract? What will be done? Who is doing the work? When is the work going to be delivered? Who is the target audience? And this is probably one of the most important informations that you can add to this contract. We look for this a lot of times. This would tell us if there is a student contact or not. It will also tell us, why is this contract being done? Who is benefiting from this contract? Is there a maximum number of participants if it is a training? What is the delivery format? This has, as you all know, has become an issue the past couple of years, but we need to have all this information in case there is some kind of dispute later on. Is the contract going to be delivered in person, virtual, or is it going to be a combination? Include any other terms that apply, like cancellation or reschedule services. If necessary, describe how rates are calculated or this information can also be described in Appendix B. Please spell out all acronyms. Just by listening to our staff from the other departments and using all these acronyms, most of us understand them just because we are in the education field and we understand, we know what they're talking about. But you always have to write a contract thinking, who is the audience that can be reading this? What if we have to go to a legal dispute? Will the lawyers be able to understand what we're saying? So that's why it's so important. Please spell out all acronyms the first time they are used, and then write the acronym in parentheses right after the complete spelling. Acronyms can be used thereafter. If possible, organize using bullet points. We know that PDF is not very format friendly, so sometimes it's not possible or it kind of acts funny. But as much as possible, organize using bullet points. List any other terms or changes to terms that have been approved by risk management and the contracts office to be incorporated to the PSA. The way our contract is written, it doesn't allow us to make changes to the body of the contract itself. So let's say you have a term that the vendor asks to be changed, and risk management and the contracts office agree to the change. So the way it's going to work is you're going to fill out all your contract, you're going to send the contract to the contracts office, and the contracts office will make the changes for you. Service location. A lot of times this step gets overlooked by whoever is writing the contract because it's on the second page of the scope of work. A lot of time we just scroll over it, but it is very important that we fill out this information. I will need to either return the contract to you or ask you to make the corrections in the routing sheet so we can have a proper and complete contract. The service location is going to be the address where the services are provided. Since we have so many still virtual or online services, other terms that you can use in these sections are various locations. Virtual are described under the project milestone and deliverables. The reason for this is sometimes some deliverables or sometimes some of the work that is going to be performed may vary in location. Project milestone and deliverables identify milestones for the completion of each phase of the project. This, and then for the date of the completion, this can be changed. This can change depending on when the work is going to be done. It can have a specific date. You can write on or about. When there is the possibility that the date might change, or you don't have a specific date as you know at the time when you're writing the contract. Or it can be something like by 6/30/22, which will be the contract end date if the services under the contract are ongoing. The location will be the physical location where the services are being delivered. Location can be different for each project milestone. That's why on the previous slide, we were saying it can be, you can say, you know, as stated in the project milestone section. It can also be listed as virtual if the services are being provided in an online format. And I wanted to focus your attention on this little note that I have at the bottom. This is something that we see from time to time because the way our contract is formatted allows you to kind of scroll down. So make sure there isn't a plus sign at the end of any of these sections. A plus sign means there is text that won't show in your final PDF copy. If you have a lot of information that you need to put in here and you can't fit it in, please contact me. Contact me, I will help you, we'll figure it out, we'll get it done. For the deliverables and acceptance criteria, identify specific deliverables based on your scope of work and milestone. In many cases, the project milestone and deliverables will be the same. For the acceptance criteria, identify the final product of each deliverable. Depending on the services, the following statement can be used under this section: as approved by, and then you can list the authorized SEC official, the authorized responsible administrator who will be reviewing and approving for the services or for the invoices to be paid. Appendix B is the compensation and schedule of payments. List key personnel like ABC company staff, ABC company trainers. Write any other terms related to payment in this section, like rates, include material, staff time, and administration fees. Invoices must be approved by the department's director. Some of the reminders regarding payments: no prepayments or deposits. We cannot pay upfront fees. Invoices can only be paid once the work has been completed. Partial invoices for work done are acceptable. Let's say you have a contract, it's $10,000. By the month of March, they have already completed half of the work. You can pay half of the contract for the work completed. Travel expenses are not reimbursable. And this is something that comes often where we have a contract and they're listing the travel expense separately. We cannot reimburse vendors for travel expenses. So they cannot be listed as a separate item in the invoice. All travel costs must be included in the total contract price. For the rate, please write down the rate and the unit. Let's say $10,000 is the total contract amount, but you're going to be paying $2,500 per quarter. Write that down. Examples that you can use for the rate are per hour, flight rate, flat rate, per day, per 8 hours. It's all going to depend on the terms of your contract. So now we're going to go through some reminders, general reminders about the contracts. Contract duration, the best practice is 1 year term. Once the contract or MOU is fully executed, enter your requisition of PO and attach a copy of the document to be used by the accountant as a reference. Many times I get calls or emails from accountants asking me for a fully executed contract or MOU. Please make sure you attach a copy of the fully executed document to your requisition so they have it available. All contracts over $3,000 need to be reviewed and initialed by purchasing and must include a sole source memo, best source memo, RFP, based on the amount and the type of service. And like Jazz said, please save yourself some time, self the vendor some time, contact them from the beginning, even before you start routing the contract, to make sure you are following all the steps required by purchasing. All contracts involving contact with or access to a student need to be processed as student contact contracts. This also includes MOUs, including services provided in a virtual format. All contracts involving student data sharing need to be reviewed and initialed by data governance. They will determine if additional forms are needed. All contracts involving technology or software need to be reviewed and initialed by technology, infrastructure, and support services. All contracts involving the use of SCCOE name or logo by the contractor need to obtain approval from media and communication. Where you can find the forms, the new forms. You can find them in the internet. Go to Forms and Templates. Visit the brand new Contracts and MOU tab. Special thanks to the Office of the Superintendent and Technology for helping us set this up in a marvelous timeline. They work really hard to get this done. So everything that you see here is now up and running. Like I mentioned, all the forms have been updated. Even the PSAs are updated. The amendment forms are updated. So if you have a copy in your desktop, get rid of it, come here to the internet, download the new forms, and please start using the new forms. If you already have something routing, don't worry about it. Put any new contract or MOU, please use the new forms. Do you have any questions? This is the staff that you can contact for questions about the general contract process. You can contact me, Ingrid Campbell. For purchasing guidelines, contact Jazz. For contractor staff screening and clearance, Marcela Miranda. And like we mentioned, this will change probably by the end of April. We will update this information, and everybody who attended this meeting will receive an email with that updated information. For proof of insurance, contact Howard. For data sharing privacy agreement, Irina. This brings us to the end of our training. For upcoming trainings, we have the routing sheets, our DocuSign training. We will go a little more into detail on the routing sheet and what's required for processing a contract. We'll also go over the DocuSign process for contracts. We also have 2 MOU trainings. The first MOU is with focus on professional development training. The truth is that both MOU trainings are pretty much the same. The first one just has a couple more slides that focus on some information, extra or additional information that the departments who are processing MOUs for professional development need to include. We strongly recommend that if your department processes MOUs, to register for one of the 2 trainings.